and I've been asked to talk about Leninist principles of organization in the Communist Party, and I'm going to be talking primarily about clubs. Okay, now I got to start off with a warning. Some of what I say is going to sound like a sermon, and sermons, as you know, are designed to make you feel bad, to feel inadequate, sinners even. So communists shouldn't do sermons. Instead, this topic should be uplifting. It's meant to showcase the lofty goals which keep us striving to be better. Why is this important? Well, because the solid principles of organization and behavior, which we have honed over time, can make the party much, much more effective than our numbers otherwise warrant, because you'll have worked out by now that our numbers are not huge relative to the needs in Canada. So I guess this session is to try and remind us why we got into this in the first place, why all of you, now new members, decided to join the Communist Party in the first place. I separately sent out a list of a couple of reference documents. I hope you got those. By the way, the last document there, I made some comments on some of them, but the last document mentioned there is the club manual that was first issued by the Central Executive Committee in November 2018. That's a year and a half ago, a little bit more. I think Drew circulated it to all the participants today. I'm not sure if it's available online. Anyway, I don't have the reference for that, but maybe Drew does. Anyway, so this club manual, sort of how-to guide, was issued only 96 years after the party was first created in 1922. You'd think we might have gotten around to creating something similar a little bit earlier, but then again, I guess the first plows and cows in Ontario never arrived with instruction books either, so there we are. But anyway, it's a very good guide to many of the issues that may puzzle or intrigue you as new members, and guide old members too. So just starting off, what are clubs? Why are they important? Well, communist parties are not one big shapeless assortment of unattached individuals. Organizationally, members have to be aggregated into basic primary units, workable units. And this is where the party club comes in. It's designed to be a work group, detachment of struggle. It's not just a study group. And I want to just quote Cronin and Stepichev. I got that as one of the references there, and you can see their little book there. It's old, 1969, I think, Soviet book. Anyway, they say the primary organizations, he's talking about the CPSU, are like the cells of a living organism. If the cells are alive and active, the organism is strong and healthy. Of course, the other side is that if they're not alive and active, well, we're in trouble. Well, first, a couple of things. First of all, the size of a club. Well, the ideal size really does depend on political circumstances. Currently, to form a club, a CPC club requires at least 3 members. But a healthy club should be large enough to allow for some kind of division of labor, development of varied skills, and cross-fertilization of backgrounds and ideas and personalities. But at the same time, it's got to be small enough for members to get to know each other well, to work together consistently, and to trust each other. So there's no mathematical formula. Clubs can't be too big. We have to avoid large grab bag groupings which lack focus and accountability. If the club grows too large, the next higher party body should consider some form of rearrangement of members. Always remembering that clubs grow organically and that drastic reorganization can disrupt and upset comradely affiliations. You may already have developed attachments to your home club, so if you were to suddenly be shoved into some grouping that takes you away from those members you've gotten to know, or from the area that you're currently operating out of, it can set you back. As for the names, the nomenclature, as they say in the Soviet Union, or they did, what are they called? Well, in some countries, the communist parties call them cells, party cells. There's a little bit of a sort of hint of being secret, illegal, conspiratorial. Certainly, they under conditions of illegality, you have to consider yourself in that light. But cells are also living, active building blocks. So, anyway, in the UK, we called them branches, but I think that was more influenced by trade unions and, maybe library branches, who knows. Clubs, when I first came to Canada, I couldn't believe that they called these communist organization clubs. I thought they were, I knew about tennis clubs and bridge clubs and Lions clubs and so on. I thought clubs was a really wussy name, to be perfectly honest. In truth, it really doesn't matter. Whatever they are, they're the basic building blocks of the party. I just want to say a little bit about the basis or on which clubs are organized, or the criteria by which they're classified or assembled. Article 7, Section 1 of our Constitution says, and I quote, "Clubs are organized in communities, cities, towns, wards, constituencies, or neighborhoods, and places of employment, or on any other basis determined by the responsible party committee in the area." So there's no set formula. There is a preferred sort of traditional way of doing it, but the party can decide on its own basis for members. Now, what am I talking about? Well, typically members in Canada, probably everyone on this Zoom thing, have been assigned to the geographical area where they live, roughly speaking. But in the past, and potentially in the future, the basis for assignment was often where they worked, where the members worked. As well as territorial clubs, in other words, there used to be what we called industrial clubs. Members grouped together according to their occupation, their line of work. Only 30 years ago, Toronto had a steel club, an auto club, a spark club for electrical workers, a building trades club, a graphic arts club, and a so-called media club. And other big towns had similar clubs. But this type of club has fallen into disuse. This is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the decimation of Canadian manufacturing over the last few decades. Secondly, our party's loss of membership in the 1990s, particularly among trade unionists. And thirdly, concerns which have always come to the surface sometimes, that they were becoming too narrowly focused on labor movement issues. They were oblivious to broader political struggles nationally and in members' neighborhoods. So now in Toronto, anyway, only the Public Sector Workers Club survives as a modified version of the Industrial Club. And I say modified because in reality, it covers a wide range of sectors, occupations, etc., education, social services, hydro, etc., etc. But that's the closest thing we have to one now. Incidentally, you'll see from Article 7, Section 1 of our Canadian Party Constitution that, quote, "Party members shall be organized in workplace clubs wherever possible." So there's expressed there a sort of preference for that form. That's when you're really beginning to get moving. Now, workplace clubs are even narrower than industrial clubs because they're for those with the same employer, the same workplace. Again, there are many examples in the past of this, but nowadays we're unable to implement this particular model, although there may still come a day, which is why it's still there in the Constitution. By the way, that whole idea of workplace clubs reminds me of when I visited the Soviet Union in 1984 as part of a CPC study group. We were touring an auto plant. Our guide showed us a big room and told us, this is the party office. Then he asked us whether employers provided the Communist Party with similar facilities in Canada. Well, once we stopped laughing, we had to disillusion him. And the same thing, by the way, when he showed us the factory's office for atheism. We don't get too far asking for those. Anyway, unlike bourgeois political parties in Canada and the NDP, we are not essentially an electoral party, so we don't organize ourselves on the basis of municipal, provincial, or federal constituency boundaries. Actually, we're not big enough to do so anyway. But we do try to focus on particular neighborhoods, communities, geographical areas, and their particular concerns. So in Toronto, we have a Parkdale Club, a Davenport Club, an East Toronto Club, a GTA West Club, and so on. Apart from Vancouver and Montreal, though, most other towns have only one club. There's also a separate question about language clubs. These have typically been justified as transitional clubs for recent immigrants who don't have a good command of English or French. Now only Leninist survives in Toronto, the Greek club, and I believe there's also one in Montreal still, even though there are no longer significant waves of immigrants from Greece. And in Toronto, we have a recently constituted Russian club. I don't know if we have any people on this call from there, but anyway, before 1990, we also had a Jedinstvo, Yugoslav club, a Gramsci, Italian club, a Russian club, a Ukrainian club, a Portuguese club. Going further back, we had a Finnish club. Vancouver now has a Spanish club. So what's the rationale for this? Well, as mentioned, they were originally designed for immigrant communities based on location, but they've also developed into a way to break through to communities which have progressive roots and revolutionary traditions back in the home country. They may also be a good vehicle to get to grips with issues of racism and economic oppression, which are currently experienced by immigrants from those particular countries. The danger that we always have to avoid with language clubs is excessive focus on the old country politics, which fosters ghettoization and parochialism and losing touch with local Canadian issues and losing touch with the broader interests of the whole working class. But the party's work can benefit from establishing this kind of club. Say, what would be the impact of a Punjabi club, a Latin American club, a Chinese club? It could be a source of otherwise unattainable recruitment. Anyway, there are different kinds of clubs. That's the basic thing. And these are everyday issues that the party has to juggle with in establishing and maintaining its network of primary units, its clubs. Finally, above all, it's very important to avoid political compatibility in club choice. That's an awkward way of putting it, but anyway, by that I mean individuals must not be allowed to club shop, to find ways to join friends or comrades who are perceived to be like-minded. That is a recipe for factionalism, which is forbidden under our Constitution. And this did become a problem, I would say, at the time of the split in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. People who had a different orientation within the party, and frankly, there were a group of people who wanted to dissolve the party. And guess what? They managed to congregate in one particular club or in this town, and another particular club in another, and so on. And this is factionalism, and this is exactly what Lenin made strictures against, in order to make the party unified and disciplined and focused. Now, last year's changes to the party constitution while they respected the importance of club involvement in recruitment, did give the higher party bodies a clearer say in the assignment of new members to particular clubs and in transfers from one club to another. I just want to quote the new article that is there now in the Constitution, Article 4. Firstly, transfer of members. It says, central, provincial, regional, or city committees shall assign or reassign members to clubs. This shall be done in consultation with the member and the clubs concerned. And that's a change of emphasis. And it goes on, it shall be the responsibility of club members to notify their club upon any change of personal circumstances which might require transfer to a more appropriate club. That I guess mostly would be they've moved house, they've changed the job, and so on. But back to the quote, the next higher level of the party shall make this determination in consultation with the current club and the proposed destination club. So it's not anything go. It's not free for all that you can change clubs or opt for a particular club. And the article also says, members wishing to transfer from one party club to another in the same city, town, or region shall apply to their club, and on receiving approval shall obtain the club secretary's signature to the transfer form in their party card. The club shall notify the next higher committee of all proposed transfers. The higher body shall decide on the appropriateness of the transfer. That kind of language, by the way, is especially important nowadays, because increasingly, and this has been a notable change certainly since I've been in the party here, but even more recent than that, our membership growth nowadays comes increasingly from online contacts with the party office, and less from club members' day-to-day work with good people, political work with good people who are eventually invited to join. So that means that the clubs do not necessarily know the track record of the particular applicant. So when the first contacts with the party office, obviously those at the center have to make an initial determination of which club is likely to be the best fit. Okay, so this takes us to the issue of membership and recruitment. Lenin's idea was to create a party as a consciously separate group within the working class. Separate. Disciplined, committed, active fighters. The term he used was professional revolutionaries, but he wasn't talking about a career path. He insisted that membership was not for the whole working class. That should not be our aspiration. There have to be clear criteria for membership. Comrades should be workers who are relatively advanced in theory or who are eager to become so. Building the party is very important, numbers, but merely applying to join, signing a card, paying a membership fee should not be enough to get accepted, and there are dangerous political consequences if this is the policy that's pursued. Today, in Canadian conditions, when we're very small and apparently insignificant, turning away potential new members seems counterintuitive. If somebody wants to apply, there's an instinctive sort of knee-jerk reaction. Wow, let's get them in, and then we'll see. But as Pronin and Stepichev insisted in that book I referenced, we must at all costs avoid, and I quote, unsuitable people, unstable elements, representatives of alien classes. We cannot afford to indiscriminately embrace all those who are disaffected, exploited, and dispossessed. So, as Lenin said, we must not dissolve our party into the mass of working people. And a layer of inactive or problematic members within the party doesn't increase our strength, doesn't help us, it diminishes our strength. As Lenin put it in the title of a 1923 pamphlet, better fewer but better. Well, in terms of the recruitment process, which you all will have gone through in the near past or maybe a bit longer, clubs are ultimately responsible for assessing and approving applicants for membership. They have to do this carefully, especially when the individuals are unknown quantities to the club's existing members, as I said before. How is this brought about? Well, ideally, this is how it's supposed to be, but there are local variations. Firstly, as I've said, there is often an informal initial interview at the party office. Somebody walks in or somebody calls in and says that they like what they see on our website, or they like some pamphlet they've seen, and they want to join. They're interested in joining. As I say, the party then looks at does a quick little assessment, I guess, but also works out where they would fit in if they were to become a member, geographically, particularly these days. The name, the person, the contact information gets sent to the club executive that's been chosen. So what happens then is that the club executive arranges to interview that person face to face, or these days we've had a couple by Zoom. So the club executive or other members who they designate to the task set up an interview, and they ask about why they want to join, what their past experience is, what their history is, and what their skills are, what they think they can contribute, and so on and so on. So that's followed by an executive report to the club, without them being present, obviously, and discussion. But by the way, in this day and age of, as I say, of internet applications and so on, one thing that often happens is that some member of the club or some member of the executive will be able to check out this person's track record on the internet. That's a sort of legitimate thing to try and do to see where they're coming from. But anyway, so the club discusses what they've heard from the executive and votes whether to accept their application. When I say accept their application, I mean invite them to attend and participate in a number of club meetings, if they decide that is appropriate. 3 is a sort of typical number of meetings that they might, and it gives that person an opportunity to suss out the Communist Party if it's not what they were expecting. They might decide to withdraw from the process, and also obviously the club may decide that it's not really a good fit, a good prospect anyway. And of course there are other party events that they can be invited to during this time. And then there's questioning about mutual feedback about what is and isn't possible, and what and if both sides are positive, then a formal vote of membership is made at the club without that member being present. But then from that time on, the member is invited to the club. Now again, this is not membership as such. The person is expected to attend club meetings, to participate in club meetings, and it's at the end of this probationary sort of situation that the final decision is made. In other words, we shouldn't take a lax anything goes approach to membership applications. And if we don't do that, we get into all kinds of anomalies. I remember in Britain, and by the way, when I came to Canada, the party was in far more organized shape in Canada than it was in Britain, even though the conditions in Britain were more favorable in many ways. But anyway, we really had a revolving door in the branch that I was a member of, and we even had one member I remember that we were really so happy that this was it was a guy. This is in Manchester, and he was actually from Ghana, I think, or Nigeria. Anyway, and he was very sort of articulate, and we said, yeah, sure, sign here. And at the first meeting, he was making all kinds of comments about how good Margaret Thatcher was. If you can believe that. I don't know why he'd even dreamt of the Communist Party. But anyway, so that person should never have gotten beyond the door, never mind accepted as a full member. But anyway, that's somebody getting into the club and making a formal swearing the oath and so on. But Pronin and Stepichev make the point that joining the party does not complete, but in fact only begins the process of the formation of the communists. Or our own club manual puts it this way: people don't join the party as fully formed Marxist-Leninists. Sometimes the yardstick comrades use, this means the comrades already in the club, the yardstick they use to assess potential members is their own current level of development after years of experience. But the appropriate measure is rather the modest level of development we had reached when we first joined the party. And I can certainly say that for myself, because I really didn't know what I was getting into, and I just wanted some action, and and so on. I learned over the months and years afterwards. So the recruitment process doesn't end when comrades are accepted into the club. That's only the beginning. And from then on, the club's duty is to devise assignments for that new member that will encourage responsibility and initiative, steadily drawing them into day-to-day activism, checking up and monitoring, arranging club educationals and ensuring participation in new members' classes, like this one, to stimulate ideological development, and so on. New members should not be left to fend for themselves. And perhaps in discussion in a few moments' time, you can chip in with your own experiences to date, good and bad in that regard. Has there been mentorship? Has there been guidance? Have there been assignments from which you've been able to learn? It doesn't all have to happen immediately, but are there signs that the club is taking your presence for granted and saying, well, he's joined, that's that problem solved? So that's the important. That's when we talk about the cells being live organisms. Is when that kind of active process is taking place, rather than just chalking it up to one more member in the club. Now, just to get on some other points about a club, as Pronin and Stepichev put it, we must resist all tendencies to reduce the role of the party to a mere recorder of spontaneously developing events. In other words, clubs have to be geared for action. We're often very good at analyzing what's happening, what trends are underway out there. We're the champions of analysis, but that's not enough. We're not a study group. In the words of Marx's 11th thesis on Feuerbach, philosophers have so far only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it, and that's what clubs are about. They are organs of change. They're organs of struggle. They are supposed to be. And, that's how a club has to measure its impact. But we're not talking about action for action's sake. We must not rely on spontaneity. We have to prepare ourselves with careful study, planning, discipline, and yes, analysis. We must train ourselves from a Marxist viewpoint, developing and popularizing strategic goals and tactics that will further the immediate and long-term revolutionary goals of the working class in Canada. And in that sense, as Lenin put it, we aspire to be a vanguard party. It's an aspiration. We seek to show the working class a way forward and how to avoid the distractions and dead ends that are out there. And that's based on concrete analysis of key issues and competing social forces at specific times. And by setting an example with tight organization of determined and selfless actions. That's how we influence. Communists try to transform the course of events and mold working class consciousness rather than just trailing at the tail of events, as they put it. But we're not, and we must not let ourselves become a sect, an arrogant, dogmatic grouplet, unwilling to learn from others, unable to adapt to complex real-world situations. There are plenty of them out there, cardboard revolutionaries. We must gauge, consider, recognize the state of consciousness, the actual state of consciousness of the working class. Yes, we look for ways to raise that consciousness, to point to paths that will advance their interests, but our interest must not be considered separate from the interests of the working class as a whole. And by the way, this is beginning to sound like a sermon, as I feared. Anyway, all these Leninist standards of party life are hard to live up to, especially in times like Canada now, where our numbers seem so tiny and capitalism and imperialism so strong. And there are so seemingly few prospects of revolutionary change on the horizon. But that's all the more need to stay committed to tried structures, to tested processes, and to firm ideology. Now, to effectively perform a vanguard role, club members must avoid and challenge all tendencies and activities which isolate the party from the working class. This is important. This means the whole working class, regardless of nationality, religion, ethnic origin, gender, sexual orientation, employed, unemployed, occupation, unionized, non-unionized, physically challenged, old, young, etc., etc. That is the environment in which we have to immerse ourselves, the working class in all its variety and all its different circumstances. And then finally, I just want to touch on the important question of personal integrity. And I'm going to quote, and then this is a sermon good and proper here. Listen to Pronin and Stepichev. They say, and this was in the CPSU when the party was in power, party rules require a communist to combat vigorously all manifestations of bourgeois ideology, remnants of private property psychology, religious prejudices, and other survivals of the past. A communist must take a clear-cut position and stand up against alien views with all the weapons at his command. He always says his. Anyway, his mission is to wage a passionate struggle for the new mode of life, for the new type of relations among people. They're talking about the new man, or the new human, or the new person. And they go on, it's a bad communist who divides his life into two parts. One connected with his work, and that means political work, and the other, the personal, his own. A real Leninist cannot make such a division in his life. Communist morality includes not just taking principled stands in political life, but also setting an example in family and community life. We must avoid drunkenness, licentiousness, arrogance, bureaucratic, bullying, hypocrisy, sexism, corruption, etc., etc. The highest standards, in other words, to inspire respect from other workers and to avoid undermining the effectiveness of our individual contribution. Well, thus spake Pronin and Stepichev. It's sort of almost like a Salvation Army. But it's a serious point, is that we have to not pay lip service to these things, we have to live it. And our own party's constitution, Article 5, Section 4 and 5, puts it like this. It shall be the obligation of every member to oppose all forms of national discrimination, oppression, and all ideological influences and practices of racial intolerance and discrimination or special privileges based on nationality. It shall be the duty of every party member to work for the complete social and economic equality of women and for the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. Party members shall set an example of gender equality in social and political life, in the home and in the workplace, and must oppose all forms of patriarchy and gender discrimination, homophobia, transphobia, and discrimination against intersex people. Okay, so there's the final sermon there, but it's just a lesson that has to be ingrained in our consciousness. Okay, well, let me just I just want to deal with one point that I stopped short of. First of all, one of the conditions for party membership is to pay party dues and to contribute financially according to one's ability. To read Pronin and Stepachev on this makes me smile a bit, because they say that the obligation to pay dues and to contribute money to the party is not because the party needs the money. Maybe the CPSU didn't need money at that point, but anyway, but it's because any member who doesn't contribute dues regularly, I quote, does not respect the party and lacks discipline. For anybody who cherishes the party, the payment of dues is actually a source of pride, because he thereby establishes material contact with its mission. Well, that's very interesting, but I got to tell you that the CPC does need the money to pay its full-time organizers, finance its press and leaflets, organize events, rallies, conventions, speaking tours, and so on and so forth. So that is not quite, Pronin and Stepachev were not quite in the Canadian circumstances. And by the way, our Constitution makes it clear that after 6 months, any delinquent member must be deemed to have left the party. And I just want to say on this point, and it's always been an issue for me, there is no room for institutional vagueness about who's in and who's out of the party. That is similar to like you say, the NDP. You pay dues, but you don't attend to any meeting. Nobody knows if he's pissed off with the party or blah, blah, blah. If he's not attending, he's not doing anything for the party and so on. Is he a member or isn't he? And so on and so forth. We have to have signed up, committed members. And if they can't carry on the commitment, okay, good luck, and so on. But you're not a party member. But of course, our due structure is flexible enough to accommodate unemployment, low wages, personal family hardship, and so on and so on. So it's not exactly a money-grabbing organization. But anyway, I just wanted to raise that point. Just, I don't know what time we're going to go on to here, Drew. But anyway, you let me know how long I got here.
Sorry, so you've got another part of the presentation, right? Or is that?
Well, I can carry on with stuff about how the clubs organize or attempt to organize their work. What is good and what isn't. But
okay, so you're asking me how much time you could go. Yeah. So it's 10 to 8. I think, could you go for another 10 minutes and then we'll have 10 minutes of discussion and then we'll get into the history? Is that okay? Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of how the club conducts itself, the main thing is you should have seen the thumbprint of this in your experience already, but clubs have to develop every year a plan of work. Okay, it's not a 5-year plan; it's a 1-year plan of work, And that is a process, developing that plan of work is a process that takes place at the beginning of each calendar year. And it follows on from a comprehensive annual review that precedes it. And that annual review is measuring how the club did in terms of its previous plan of work. Did it reach the targets? Did it do the things that it said it was going to do? And so on. And everybody, all the club members, are expected to chip in there as to what their experience has been, and where they think they could be better used, or what the party could do that would be different, and so on and so forth. So that annual review is a very important process, and it's followed up by an equally important thing, which is the plan of work for the following year. And it's not just something that the club has to sort of start with from nothing. The role of the executive is, or should be, to discuss in its own committee meetings what the basic elements of this annual review and plan of work should be, and to provide a draft of that to the club to help their discussion in those meetings. So those two meetings, the annual review and the plan of work, are actually crucial measurements of the club's progress and effectiveness. And well, to be perfectly honest, when I was in the Steel Club, we used to do this absolutely meticulously, I have to say, and also there was an obligation then, and I think it's there in the. I'm not sure if it's there in the party constitution now, but anyway, we had to file our plan of work and our club review with the. In those days, the city office, so that they could see what we were doing, and they could anyway. So we're not just idly going by week. We are supposed to have a project, a plan with different elements in it, and so on. So that's one thing about the way that clubs work or are expected to work, and you can. I'd be interested to hear if people are experiencing this, or to what extent this is true. The other thing is that the new members, which we were talking about before, they have to be given assignments. They have to, assignments that are discussed with them originally, but that have to be regularly discussed, and suggestions given in club meetings, because communists are not individuals. They are expected to be collective in their style of work, and they are supposed to welcome others chipping in with suggestions and criticism, self-criticism, and so on, in a comradely way. So assignments have to be chosen, obviously, for new members, depending on their personality or their experience and so on. You have to make sure that you're not loading them up with something that they is too much to handle. But on the other hand, you can't leave people with nothing to do, feeling like a spare part in club meetings, and leaving it to the longer term members and so on and so forth. There has to be reports at meetings and checkup at meetings of what's going on with those assignments. Not necessarily every club meeting, but there has to be a collective. In terms of the role of the executive does have an important role in providing guidance to the club in terms of proposals and so on. And they devise the club agenda for every meeting. One of the most important things, certainly is what I feel, is educationals. They have to, certainly in our club and most of the other clubs I've been in, we've We've had an educational at every meeting. An educational element doesn't have to be more than 15 minutes. It can be longer, where responsibility is given to members, spread among the members, to present on some particular topic that they choose or that is agreed would be appropriate, and so on. Really what we're trying to do, apart from educating ourselves, is to develop members' confidence in presenting arguments and, a confidence that will spill over into public speaking and so on and so forth. So, this is a very important part of our club agenda too. But the other thing is, of course, is political actions that we have to wrap our heads around and commit ourselves to. It's a little bit difficult in the COVID situation. That's sort of put a bit of a break on a lot of political activities. But the political kernel of the meetings is the important thing, and we have to minimize bureaucratic details. I'm talking about, it drives me nuts. Endless financial reports and reports on sales of it used to be sales of literature, but anyway, sales of People's Voice and so on and so forth. I mean, these are very important things, but they have to be dealt with by the executive and then digested into a form for the club to discuss without all the details that so there can be political decisions made about those. A healthy club is one where the members we have in our constitution that we should meet at least every month, and is one where people feel that they are achieving political clarity and committing themselves to political actions at every meeting. That's what we should be aiming at. And and it's a role of the executive in particular, but to try and activate all the members and not omitting the new members and saying, well, they're just sitting there learning and so on. Sure, they're learning, but they can learn by involvement much more, and that is something that is very important for the executive to take responsibility for. I would be interested in hearing what people's experience is. I can remember when I first joined the party in the UK. I'd been wrestling quite a while with whether I could, submit my ego to being directed to do all these huge tasks, and whether I could fit in within democratic centralism and so on, and blah blah blah. And then the first club discussion was about a garage sale, and who could bring what to it and so on. It was sort of, in a way, it was demoralizing, but on the other hand, you've got to deal with that too. But it shouldn't really be a central point of a club meeting. So the club meetings are should be the lifeblood of the party, and I'd be interested to hear how people have experienced their club meetings, whether they feel the party is living up to its notional principles.